Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, which is part 3, chapter 3 of our video course on how to fight e4 like Caruana, we will look for the first time at the starting moves of the Petroff, which is the sequence. Black plays knight f6, just answering symmetrically to white's attack on the e5 pawn. So both sides actually now have a pawn attacked. In this position, the most popular moves for white are knight takes e5. This is by far the most popular. And then there is also d4. Those two moves actually are the main chunk of the Petroff. White, however, does not need to play exactly those moves, of course. There are other options, and the video 3, part 3, will deal with white playing either knight c3, bishop c4, or d3. Other moves don't really make all that much sense. I mean, black is attacking this pawn, so it makes sense to either increase the pressure on the pawn on e5, like d4 does, or take it, or defend e4. Those are really the most logical options. Bishop c4 is a gambit line that we will also check. I need to mention that after knight c3, I recommend to play knight c6, which transposes into the 4 knights opening. And one big part of that is bishop b5 in this position. I can put it on the board. Or d4, and those two lines are dealt with in chapter 4. A little bit too chunky to put it into one chapter. I tried that initially, but it was just too much. So I split this into 2 chapters. It's easier to digest this way. So in this chapter, we will look at the 4 knights, the rare 4 knights, and we will check all the deviations here on move 3 that white may play. Those are really not very dangerous, but it's useful to have a look. The first move that I want to check is the move d3. Very conservative move that cannot really endanger us all that much, but okay, it's worth looking at briefly. White covers e4, and now e5 is indeed attacked, so I recommend to play knight c6. Very logical. In a book by Konstantin Sakayev recommends to play d6 instead, which is feels a little bit passive, but it's playable and not a bad option. He goes d6 and g6, but knight c6 is super logical. Here white has tried mostly 2 moves. He has to decide whether he wants to put the bishop here on e2 or whether he wants to fianchetto. And these are the 2 options that we should check. Let's start with bishop e2. If white wants to play that way, of course, he can also play knight bd2 first and then bishop e2. It's not a big difference. What we'll do is we'll play d5. And this is something that I will emphasize throughout the videos, and also I emphasize throughout the text. It is absolutely essential to see that if black manages to play d5 in the Petroff or in general in the open games, and manages to play it without being in some way punished or in some way having problems after it, then usually you have solved your opening problems. And this is no exception. We immediately see that black should be fine. We've got easy development and good central play. White now has a choice between taking on d5 and playing knight bd2. The move e takes d5, this has become a little bit more popular in recent years. It's still obscure in comparison, but it was played more than, let's say, 20 years ago. The point probably is that after knight takes, white castles, and this particular way of playing is basically a Philidor's defense with reversed colors. This early d3, white is basically playing the role that black plays in the Philidor's and is a tempo up. And that makes a difference in some lines. For example, in the wide repertoire that I've released, the Keep It Simple e4 against the Philidor's, I recommend to play a g3 based setup But here g6 is not so great because white has a favorable move d4 in this position. So we have to play differently here, and I suggest to play bishop to d6. Just very normal, develop the bishop, prepare castling and cover e5. Rook e1, castles is very normal. h3, trying to prevent bishop g4 from happening. And now a move like bishop f5 gives black very decent play. This is not a forced move, of course. Bishop f5 you can also play differently, but something with queen d7 next and centralize rooks is a good plan. In general, this is a very solid way of playing. It is not very enterprising what white is doing, but you're not going to win quickly with black. Yeah, just centralize and be happy that you have all those good developing moves and good central control. The capture on d5 cannot trouble us all that much. More often, still more often, after d5, white is playing knight bd2 and covers this pawn. It was attacked after all. And here indeed we have the closed Philidor with colors reversed. In the Philidors with white, I always recommend to play the bishop to c4, so our development here with bishop c5 is extremely logical. What we have to be aware of is that now in this opening, the white play is more of a setup than a concrete string of moves that is just going to happen like clockwork. Like there's no combination or anything happening. White is playing a bunch of moves in a basically flexible move order. Moves like c3, a3, b3, castling, rook e1, and so on. There are just some rules of thumb that I want to tell, because that is, I think, all you need to know. Whenever they play c3 or a3 and try to push b4, we should always play the move a5. This is very important. We should not give white an easy opportunity to expand there on the queen side. Whenever b4 is played, then they have bishop b2 and so on. Just stop it with the a pawn. That's very important. I think that you need to know that you should not take on e4 all that frequently. You should have a very clear reason for doing that, because if we trade the two pawns, we would activate the white bishop. Instead of changing the pawn structure in any way, it is usually better for black to simply improve the position and keep the tension. Moves like rook e8, bishop a7, h6, those moves, bishop a7, not h7, and rook e8, these are useful. Just keep the tension. I don't think you need to know much more. If you play the white side of the Philidors, for example, you know what you're going to do. It is something that will happen very rarely and does not really put us under lots of pressure, really. If we go back to that position on move 3, more interesting maybe in comparison is the move g3. White is trying to fianchetto it and basically plays a King's Indian attack setup. So we're going to play d5. That is not a surprise. And now again, white has this choice between keeping the tension and taking on d5. If they keep the tension, we could do the same by playing bishop c5, but it is actually a very simple solution to take here on e4 and put the bishop onto c5. The capture makes our life a little bit easier because we don't have to think about constantly if white takes, what happens. And here the capture is not a concession really compared to bishop e2 lines, because the white bishop sits on g2 anyway. So we don't activate the bishop because it's on g2. And after something like that, black has a fine game. The idea is to play b3 and b6 and bishop a6, and this will be very comfortable. Another maybe more creative way to view this position is if we go all the way back, a little bit of a detour. In the French defense, white sometimes plays the move d3, and black, one of black's most reliable responses is this, where black enters the whole thing here with the tempo down, and it has the reputation of being completely fine for black. So we basically enter this whole thing with the tempo up. Okay, after g3, d5, we still have to check what happens if white captures. Okay, of course we recapture, bishop g2. If you enjoyed the free video preview, make sure to go to chessable.com/fightlikecaruana to get the full course. The full course with the Move Trainer and video sync technology is an excellent way to learn all the ideas and strategies connected to this repertoire. These lines were essential in Caruana's fight to get the world title match, and they can be an essential part of your opening repertoire as well.